All right. Welcome everybody to the Collective Action Passport kickoff call. Last week at ETH Denver, I gave a presentation about the Collective Action Passport and what we're doing with Panvala to drive more resources to community life. And this today is really the start of the project for what I defined. Again, Panvala has existed for several years. It's a network of communities that work together to drive more resources to community life. But so far, we've mostly been focused on building up the network, and not focused so much on driving value back into the communities. Just using our token supply as kind of a proxy. Like we can kickstart the network by just saying, "Hey, pretend this currency is the resource you're going to be getting, and it already has a market value." So we can just basically go through the process of sharing an endowment together as our communities without focusing so much on driving value back in. But today is when we start driving value back in, because again, you can't do that forever. It's just a way to kickstart what we've been doing. So the presentation that I gave last week has more meat in it than what I'm going to tell you today. So definitely go to our YouTube channel and check that out if you want the whole thing. There's a lot of inspirational vibes in it that I think will make you feel even better about it. But for this one, I'm just going to kind of go over one more time the details of what the Collective Action Passport actually is without the warm fuzzy stuff. So I'll just dive right in. Feel free to interrupt me with questions. It's totally okay. Yeah. So let's go ahead with it. So the Collective Action Passport, again, there's no software for this that exists today. What the Collective Action Passport is a playbook for using crypto to coordinate collective action. So you could really use this to probably do any collective action you might have in your mind, any collective action you've seen in the past. You could probably use the same playbook to coordinate that kind of collective action. But the collective action that we're trying to coordinate within Panvala, it's collective action that drives value away from middlemen in our current economy and towards our communities, the communities that you and I are a part of, the communities that none of us are a part of, but somebody else is. We want to drive resources to community life across the board using the value that's currently captured by middlemen. So the here is that the way you earn stamps in your collective action passport is by taking an action that helps our collective action. Every time you do that, you earn a stamp in this passport. And what these stamps are collective action NFTs, a specific list of them that we all agree to display in the collective action passport. Every community, every person who is participating in this kind of has a consensus on what should be in there. That is, if you're driving value to community life, those are the stamps that should be in there because that's what our collective action is. So our collective action has two objectives. The first objective is for us to collectively increase what we each give to our own communities. That is more resources from our own pockets going to the communities that we care about. It's part of our collective action. The second objective is to collectively increase what businesses give to our communities. We don't just want it to be resources from our own pockets going to our communities, although that's required. We also want to have more resources than we have today to engage in community life and to help our communities achieve their missions. The general idea here is that when we're working to drive value from businesses to communities, the specific communities we want to get those resources are communities that you and I are already willing to give our own resources to support. Those are the communities that we're trying to support. Everyone always has questions on like, oh, what do you mean by community? Because it's such a vague and abstract concept. It's any group of people that you support out of your own pocket. Member-driven communities is the general idea here. So there's a lot of things that fall into that. It's very broad. Clubs, classes, recreational sports leagues, DAOs, any group of people coming together to do something where they are all making it happen is the idea. So when it comes to earning these stamps, the first kind of stamp that you can earn is stamps from your own community. That is, what we're trying to do is get people to contribute to their community, earn the stamp that shows up in their collective action passport. So literally any community that's already issuing some sort of NFT for becoming a member of that community, we want to show their stamps in the passport. And we want to encourage people who aren't issuing NFTs to start doing that so we can show off those contributions in the collective action passport. So there's a couple of examples of communities that already do this. I live in Austin, Texas, where there's a DAO called ATX DAO, kind of a city DAO where everyone in the city is encouraged to join, and they issue NFTs for their memberships. So when you make a contribution to the DAO, you get an NFT that represents your membership. We want that to show up in the collective action passport. There's a project called Rainbow Rolls where you make a donation and you get an NFT that represents that you helped pay off somebody's medical debt. We want that to show up in the collective action passport. And then there's Gitcoin's Moonshot bots, where you make a contribution to help fund public goods and their donation matching rounds. And we want that to show up in the collective action passport. These are just a couple of examples, but these three examples have a lot of differences from the NFTs that you've probably heard a lot about, from the NFTs that many people are talking about. First of all, these are typically not speculative. Like, people aren't earning these, they're not buying these because they think they're going to increase in value. That's not really the point. They're earning them because they want to be part of the community. They want to help the community achieve its mission. And that's the reason they're earning. They're more like achievements than like collectible fine art. And secondly, they're typically community-centric rather than creator-centric. You're not earning them because of something that the creator did, because it's incredibly beautiful, although we want them to look nice. It's not because they're especially rare, it's because they help do something that the community wants to do. That's the whole point. So there's a couple of things that when you open up somebody's collective action passport and see these stamps from different communities in it, there's a couple of questions these stamps don't answer. They don't answer how much you contributed to our collective action, because unless you're involved in each community, you don't know what hoops somebody had to jump through to earn a particular stamp. So it doesn't tell you how much somebody contributed. And it also doesn't tell you when somebody contributed. And since we're trying to engage in collective action, that has to happen over time to shift value from middlemen to our communities. We need people to be participating over and over again to make it happen. So these community-specific stamps don't answer that, but there's a second kind of stamp that you can earn that does answer that, and those are our standardized stamps. So again, these are still issued by the communities, and they're collectively governed. So we all decide what it takes to earn one of these stamps. But again, you go to each community to earn it. So when you go to ATX DAO, you make a contribution, you might get their NFT, but you can also get a standardized NFT at the same time if it meets those criteria. There's dates on each of these, so you know when somebody earned it. And you, again, it's not something that you earn instead of the community specific stamp, you earn it at the same time. So for some examples, you can think of like a bronze level, a silver level, a gold level for different amounts of contributions that we all agree on as a network. Like, you have to contribute this much to the community to get the bronze, this much to get a gold. That's the idea there. And then again, you might earn the winter stamp and come back and get the spring stamp and come back and get the summer stamp, because again, we want action over time, because that's what it's going to take to achieve our goal. So that's standardized stamps. There's a second kind of standardized stamp, which is a local stamp. So again, the same principles apply, collectively governed, different tiers for different contributions and dates on them, except these are just governed by the communities in the same city. And the reason this is so important is because our whole ethos is about community life, right? But so many of the communities that we've organized so far are virtual, digital communities. Community life thrives in person. So we need to make sure that we're encouraging people to organize in person with the communities they can hang out in person. And that's what the local stamps are all about. Before I keep going, does somebody have a question? All right, I'm going to mute whoever's unmuted. All right, feel free to stop me if you have questions. I'm going to keep going. So we talked a little bit about that first objective of our collective action, that's increasing what we get from our own pockets to our communities. The second objective is to increase what businesses give to our communities. So that's where the additional resources come from that you didn't have access to before. And to get those, that's what we use sponsored stamps in our collective action passport to do. These stamps work a little bit differently. It's not something that you contribute to. You don't buy these stamps You don't make a contribution to get them. These are purchased by advertisers. So literally businesses in our current economy, a lot of them are spending money to get customers in the door. And any business that's doing that, we want them to purchase these sponsored stamps to get customers in the door. That's the shift that we're trying to make happen. So these stamps are earned by customers. That is, you show up to a business and that business gives you the sponsored stamp. These stamps have a face value on them. So whatever contribution that business made, it shows up as a face value, and that's the amount of funding that you can get for your community. And then you redeem them with a community of your choice. So for a quick example, to break that down and make it easier to understand, imagine that Coinbase is trying to get customers in the door. They actually already offer $5 to anybody who signs up for a Coinbase account for the first time. They're already doing this. And what I'm about to describe to you is more effective than that. So imagine that instead they're saying, come sign up for a Coinbase account and we'll fund your community with $5. So the way they accomplish that with the collective action passport is by putting $5 in our endowment if they want to mint a $5 stamp. So now they have a $5 stamp that they can offer to their customers. They put on their website, hey, sign up for Coinbase and we'll fund your community with $5. We'll give you the stamp to make that happen. So then people start doing that. We start encouraging people in our own communities to go get the stamp, because again, it funds our communities just out of pure self-interest. We want all of our friends to go get the stamp, have it show up in their collective action passport. We're checking people's passports. We're like, hey, did you do this yet? Go do it, because it funds our community. So then you go do it. You earn the stamp, you now have it. And what you can do is choose which community in the network that you want to redeem the stamp with. In this example, I'm choosing to redeem it with ATX DAO because they're pretty cool. So I earned my sponsored stamp, I redeem it with ATX DAO. And what that allows ATX DAO to do is withdraw the $5 that Coinbase put in the endowment in the first place. When Coinbase put that money in endowment and got that stamp, they had no idea which community I wanted to support. They just knew that they wanted to help customers support their own communities. So by organizing ourselves, by building up a large enough network of as many communities working together as possible, we actually can give a better way to spend their marketing dollars. Again, they're spending on these sponsored stamps that you and I are going to be promoting in our own communities because it funds our communities. That's what makes it a better model than the current advertising model that currently exists. And that's what allows us to shift that value that middlemen like Facebook and Google, who are currently collecting lots of money and helping Mark Zuckerberg buy more and more of Hawaii based on our attention, based on the ads that we look at. That's the value that we're shifting to fund our communities. So that's what our collective action is all about. We're trying to shift value from middlemen, particularly advertising middlemen, to our communities. The end goal is to have a community endowment for anyone to be able to draw from. So really the question at the end of the day is, if we have the entire advertising spending in our economy available for you and me to draw from, what are you going to do with it? What would you do with more resources that you could spend with your community? Maybe you would preserve our climate for generations to come. Our collective action is going to give you the resources to do that. Maybe you want to make housing in our cities affordable for all kinds of people. By working together, we can make that happen. Maybe you want to provide a high quality education for the next generation without crippling them with debt. We can get that done together. But maybe you're not a do-gooder at all. Maybe there's not a cause that you have in mind. Maybe you just want to have more resources to make a better experience when you hang out with the people you care about. That's what community life is all about. That's what our collective action is intended to draw resources towards. We want to help you have a better time with the people you care about at the end of the day. So that's what this project is all about. So before I dive into again, the meat of today's call, which is how we get from nothing, which is what we have today, besides a thriving network of 77 communities, to having the collective action passport that actually helps us drive value back to our communities. Pause to see if anybody has any questions that I can answer.
So just to clarify, the really cool, super awesome. I love this. And so in order to get the token in order to get this stamp and generate the Coinbase $5, right? I have to sign up for Coinbase. So my act is it's an act of purchase in this instance. It's commerce, right?
Yes, the company, the business that is offering the stamp gets to set whatever criteria they want on earning the stamp they want.
Mhm.
So it could be based on signups. If we're using the Coinbase example, let's say they want to encourage more trading. So they're like, hey, a percentage of your trading fees will go to fund your business, to fund your community. We're just gonna put the face value on the stamp that's proportional to your trading fees. Maybe it's some other business goal that the company has. But again, at the end of the day, it's the business's decision about how they distribute the sponsored stamps that they've minted.
Got it. Great.
Any other questions before we keep it moving? Go for it.
Just a point of curiosity. It feels like the sponsored stamps are the thing here. Is that a fair way of looking at it? Like the other stuff sounds great and I think is really important. But in terms of like the breakthrough and the sustainable kind of rethinking attention and giving and collective action, the sponsored badges feel like the thing. Is that a fair way?
In a sense, I agree, because at the end of the day, where the resources that you don't have today are coming from are from the sponsored stamps. That's how you and your community get more resources. Everything else, though, is part of the complete package that we need to organize our collective action. That is, if we just said we're doing sponsored stamps without everything else, I believe it would be very hard to actually organize the collective action that's necessary to make the sponsored stamps happen. At the end of the day, we have to be community centric from the ground up. That is, we have to build a network of communities, starting with the 77 that we've already organized, and plug in more and more communities over time by serving them directly with something they can benefit from today. And that is the collective action passport. We want to highlight the contributions that people are making to every community across the ecosystem to give them something to be part of. And as we grow that network of participating communities, that's what makes the sponsor stamps actually possible. When we go to Coinbase and say, hey, like offer these sponsored stamps, this is how they work, it's going to be more effective for you than what you're doing today. For that to be true, there have to be communities that are already organized to take advantage of it. So it's about serving communities and how they already function, that is based on the contributions of their members, and then going and getting businesses to support them. So you're right, but we need both.
Does participating community mean a Panvala member, or are you imagining some other like application process for communities that can benefit from that?
So yes, we mean Panvala members. So no new application process. If your community is already part of Panvala, then you're already part of this. If your community is not part of Panvala, we want you to be part of it. Again, the way that we've been growing Panvala's network so far is by offering to both plug a community into our social network, that is building tighter bonds between people across communities, but also plugging them into our economic network, that is letting them benefit from our shared endowment that we release from every quarter. That approach has worked for many kinds of communities. There's other communities that haven't been drawn in yet. And basically showing them how we close the loop is how we make that pitch to the communities that have been hesitant so far, both by showing off how their community members are already contributing through the collective action passport, and by showing them how additional resources come in. Because again, people are skeptical of tokens in general for obvious reasons, but literally just presenting the flow of value in the system without the token, even though there is a token involved, is what's necessary to get some people across the line. At the end of the day, the goal is just collective action, helping many, many communities work together to reclaim the value that's already theirs. Like many DAOs are trying to create brand new value from brand new products, and that's great. That's just not what we're trying to do. What our work is valuable, like the things that you do are important, but the value that we're trying to allocate is value that we've already created The value that you're already creating every time you look at an ad, that's yours. You just don't get it right now. And that's what we're aiming to shift through our collective action.
So a quick question. So this kind of seems like a way to take the value in, the value of influence that Panvala has already built and sort of aggregate it and put it to meaningful work for all of the member communities. Does that sound kind of true?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. So you can think of everything that Panvala has done so far as basically kickstarting a network of communities to engage in collective action. It's hard to start a collective action from zero. That is saying, hey, come do this thing. There's going to be all these people doing it with you. That's hard to do. But since our pitch from day one was join this network that's sharing these resources, that was something we could do from day one because we had a token. It was very easy to share resources because we created resources. So now that we're at the point where we have a network of communities, now the collective action can begin. Now is the time to start using the size of our network to start pushing and getting the resources that, again, are already entitled to us because they come from us in the first place. Any other questions?
Yeah, just one quick one. I assume I know the answer, but why not? I assume that they're going to, like, the advertisers, the sponsors are going to be buying it in the Panvala token. That's what they'll put the money in as.
Yes. So again, when we talk about the endowment, the sketch that I had was just literally dollars because it makes it easier to understand. How Panvala actually works is that the endowment is our token supply. So we've already been giving out resources to the communities in the network from the inflation of the token supply, which can inflate to a maximum amount, kind of like Bitcoin, where there's a 21 million cap. Panvala's token also has a cap of 100 million. So we've been inflating up to that cap. What our sponsors will do when they buy their sponsored stamps is buy Pan off the open market, put it back into the token supply so the endowment can keep going. So it's really not as simple as the jar with money in it that was on that slide. It's literally completing the cycle of our token supply that we've been inflating, and now we're going to put tokens back in. The people doing that are sponsors.
Cool, thanks.
All right, so we're at
Is
30
there any
minutes.
lens, or sorry, any kind of like particular mission that the communities that get onboarded have to fulfill, or is it basically a collection of communities to then do collective action, and then the vote basically comes in on what the topic is?
That's a great question. So with Panvala, the topic is community life. That is, for the communities that are working together in this network, we don't really care what your community does. Are people who like each other coming together on a regular basis to do things they like? If so, we want to work with you. That's it. The only kinds of communities I foresee us excluding are communities that are actively hateful or abusive, objectionable communities that we want nothing to do with. Those communities aren't going to be part of the network. Other than that, we want to be maximally inclusive because, again, this is about collective action. The same way that the labor movement wanted as many workers as possible, we want as many communities as possible. Again, you can't include literally every community because some communities want bad things, but you can include tons of communities that I personally would never be a part of because they don't interest me. But like, I want to work with them anyway because together we're stronger. Together we can drive more value to community life.
Can I say something? Can I add something?
Go for it.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, like it's kind of like the community life is the container in which culture kind of develops, and what people want to work on together is usually an organic reflection of what's important in the space. What are our joint concerns? And the coalitions are a place where some of those best ideas and topics like originate. So conversations between, founders and community members and people spinning up projects, sharing their concerns, and then like figuring out that they have shared concerns and that we should work on raising awareness and sharing resources over those, mixing teams, supporting each other. So like, just as an example, the Women-Led Web3 Coalition has spun off all kinds of projects and events that have developed into, even a more inclusive definition of women-led Web3, which is an inclusive Web3. So an intersectionally inclusive Web3. So that's just an example of like something that kind of arose out of people talking and working together, and like inside of the cultural container that Panvala offers.
Thanks, Jovian.
Sure. I think we'll see lots of cool collective action projects. And I also like the word collective action. I think that's a beautiful, very Web3, very future forward, very collaborative, open, welcoming, inspiring, just word, or term. So I like that that's like a big part of this new tool.
Yeah, actually, when I started saying collective action a couple times, I noticed you in particular say it back to me, and I was like, "Oh, wait, you're saying the words that I said. Maybe there's something good in these words. Maybe I should try using this more." So that's kind of where it came from.
Hell yeah. Cool. I love it.
Awesome. So I'm going to dive into the next part of this just to get through it. Again, if you want to talk more about this, my calendar is literally for you. So let's make sure that happens. Reach out to me. We'll set up a call. So don't feel like your time for questions is over. Let's make it happen. But wanted to get in really quick to the issue of how we actually build this thing. Because again, Panvala exists. There's a network of 77 communities. We share an endowment that comes from our token supply, but the collective action passport does not exist. That's what we're kicking off today. That's what you and I are going to build together. So how are we going to build this? The general idea here is there's a couple of principles. We want to build in the open. That is, we don't want this to be something that happens in a back room and then we release and say, hey, everybody come use it. We want to build in the open because this is all about collective action. We want the people who are going to participate in this action to be able to shape it as we build it. So we build in the open. Secondly, we build for our communities. That is, the 77 communities that are already part of Panvala have already expressed a willingness to be part of something bigger than themselves. They are the clearest constituents, more or less, the clearest potential users of what we build. So we reach out to them, we show them what we're building, we ask them for their input because they are the ones who are using this at the end of the day. And lastly, we build for our future communities. Again, sure, there are 77 communities today. They're very important. We need to work with them and figure out what they want to build. But also we have to have an eye forward that our collective action needs thousands of communities working together to make it work. So we build with them in mind as we're putting this together. So there's a couple of initial work streams that you can think of as we kickstart this project. Not everything can start today, but some of it can literally start today. So the first work stream I'm going to talk about, I'm referring to as the stamp hunters. We can rename this. This is just what came out of my head when I pulled it out. But the stamp hunters are the people who go around and basically find communities that are already issuing potential stamps for the collective action passport. Those are effectively the next wave of potential Panvala communities. That is, we want to work within Panvala 77 communities, surface any potential stamps that are in those communities, but there's plenty of communities outside of Panvala that are issuing things that could be potential stamps. We want to find them and effectively create a database of them. I'll go more into that one in a second. The second one is passport design. So really, before we can start any of the engineering work, which is the third work stream, we want to have some rough sketches that we can iterate on of what this passport looks and feels like, how people will use it, what it means to earn a stamp, what it means to show off your stamps, how you're looking at somebody else's stamps. Like, again, the whole point of this is to be able to coordinate collective action. So there's plenty of examples in the past that we can look at of how people have coordinated collective action, but also just keeping in mind the behaviors that we expect people to participate in. At the end of the day, we're trying to get people to do something over and over and over again. And having a good design that makes it easy and feasible for that to happen is important. So that's another thing that can literally start today. The last one is the engineering part. We're not going to start the actual engineering part until we have some relatively stable designs of what we want to put together. So going into the stamp hunters workstream for a little bit, the first thing that I personally think we can deliver is basically a database of all the stamps that we expect people to be able to earn. So again, this is not a technical project at all. You don't need any technical skills, but literally it's about reaching out to as many communities as possible, digging in deep, finding where they're issuing things that could be stamps, whether they are literal NFTs or something that could be an NFT, and collecting those in a database. So that means reaching out to our existing communities within Panvala. That means reaching out to communities across Web3 and literally just collecting a database of all the potential stamps. This is work that requires zero technical background. As long as you've been involved in Web3 and you kind of know what's going on, you see the examples of potential stamps that we've talked about, and you find more that look like that, that's really what we're trying to get across. Even since we've announced this effort, there's already been communities that reached out. There's one that I believe is called Toucan Protocol, where they allow people to effectively offset carbon, I believe. And when you do that, you earn an NFT. Like that's something that we want to include in the collective action passport. There's so many people doing things like this that we're trying to connect so they can do better work together. It doesn't just have to be their community members offsetting carbon. Effectively, they can get sponsors to offset carbon without even knowing that they're doing that. Again, they're just trying to get customers in the door. They're like, we'll give your community resources to do whatever you want to do, and you happen to use it to offset carbon. That's the future we're trying to build. So that's what the Stamp Hunters Workstream is all about. Any questions about that before I move on?
Naran, I have just one real quick. Would POAPs be considered inside of that framework as well, or are they somewhat different and outside of it? So
POAPs are really the best thing to think about when we think about the kinds of stamps that go in the collective action passport, mainly because they're kind of like achievements. That is like, you don't sell a POAP typically. Like if you buy a POAP for an event that you didn't go to, man, you're super lame, man. Like that doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? So they fit the model. The issue is that they are typically non-economic. That is, you didn't make a contribution of money or labor to earn a POAP necessarily. So for some communities, they will want to put their POAPs in the collective action passport, and we're not going to stop them. I don't think they're perfect. That is, for the standardized stamps, when you earn a POAP, you're probably not going to earn any of the standardized stamps. But when it comes to the community specific stamps, we want to be maximally open. If some community says we want this POAP to show up as a contribution to our community in the collective action passport, our default answer is going to be yes.
Awesome. That's a great clarification. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? All right. What do I have next in here? So the next issue is rewarding work. So we want people like you on this call to be the people who do this work. This work is going to happen regardless. That is, the collective action passport will exist, but I think it will be better if it's built by people like you. So we want to make sure that anybody can plug into this project and contribute and be rewarded for it. So there's a couple of different models of how rewarding work happens in Panvala already and how it can happen for this project. So first of all is the Panvala Fellows program. So this is an existing program, and it's how we already reward work within Panvala. There's a portion of the endowment each quarter that goes to a wallet that the Panvala Fellows collectively manage. I don't manage it. I don't tell them what to do. Nobody tells them what to do. They self-manage, and they decide how they're going to use those resources to move Panvala forward. So some of the people who contribute, particularly I think stamp hunters, if you're interested in that work stream, I think they'll contribute mainly through the Panvala Fellows program. They'll make contributions. The way people get rewarded currently within that program is by reporting hours to your peers in the fellows and then earning compensation as a result. So I think that's one way that fits with the work that we have ahead. Another potential option is to create a new multi-sig that works in a similar way. So not necessarily the existing Panvala Fellows multi-sig, but another multi-sig that's particularly for this project, where we would have signers from active contributors to this project, and they would get a portion of Panvala's endowment each quarter while the project is going to be able to allocate to reward themselves. So that would literally be Pan tokens that they can use to reward themselves. They can use that directly. They can swap it out for any other currency. They can do whatever they want as long as it's moving the project forward. So that's a potential thing that we can propose. Again, this doesn't exist, but if people want it, I want to make sure that it's something on the menu. And lastly, there's always contract-based work. So it's like there are not infinite resources in the Panvala endowment. So sometimes there is more work we want to do than is currently flowing out of the endowment. So that's when we put together contract-based work where effectively I hire people on contracts and pay them to do work. So those are the three models that generally I think can fit within this project. So if you're thinking about being a contributor, I want to make sure that there's a way to reward you that fits with the way that you work. So definitely looking for feedback on these approaches, especially if you're excited about any of those particular approaches, but also if you don't see one that fits you, we want to make sure there's something that works. So that's all I have slides. Definitely want to hear from as many people as possible, both about like how you see yourself contributing to this, how we can help you contribute, and basically answer any remaining questions about the collective action passport in particular.
Could I get like a little like recap of like what are the first steps that you need help with to start making the collective action passport possible?
So for people who literally want to start working today, the two kinds of work that you can do today are being a stamp hunter, that is filling out the database of potential stamps from across communities, and designers who can help actually design the thing that we're going to build to display people's collective action passports and the stamps. Both of those can start today. There's more work that's going to be needed over time, but those are the things so far that are clear to me that can start today. I may have missed something. So if there's some work that you think it needs to be done that isn't encapsulated in that can also start today, I want to make sure to highlight that as well.
Can you explain what kind of stamps you're looking, can you explain again what a few examples of the types of stamps that you're looking for?
Absolutely. So in general, what we're trying to do together is encourage more contributions to community life, both from you and I, individuals, and from businesses. So the three examples that I had in the presentation were things like membership NFTs. So any DAO where you make a contribution to the DAO and you earn an NFT, we want that to show up in the passport. Anytime you make a donation and you get an NFT for that, we want that to show up as a stamp in the passport. There's a project that reached out to me over the past few days. They're the Toucan project. And again, they are trying to build a carbon ledger. And whenever you offset carbon, you earn an NFT for that. So any community where the members are contributing their money or their labor to something that the community cares about, we want to include them in this passport. The edge cases are things where it's like a community that's that's building a business, so they're contributing to a business that they intend to pay them. Like there's no rule against that right now, but that's just not a perfect fit. What we're trying to do is things that feel more like communities.
So we're looking for the traces, the sort of blockchain traces of community life to put in the collective action passport.
That is an accurate way of phrasing it. The one caveat there is that you don't necessarily need to search the blockchain for it necessarily. Like there's communities that if you are like exploring Web3, you're going to come across different communities. And basically what the stamp hunters do, they keep their ears perked for anything that sounds like it can be a stamp. So just literally in the communities that you're part of, if somebody says, oh yeah, we're going to give people an NFT when they do this, and you're like, oh man, that would be a good stamp for the collective action passport. That's what we want to have a database of every single time.
Do they have to be NFTs?
They do not. So if there's something else that you think would be a good fit, we're going to include that in the database instead and figure out how to make it work. The easiest things are NFTs because people are already doing it and there's already kind of standards for displaying them. But even if it's not an NFT, we care about that and want to make sure there's a record of it.
What's the process for becoming a fellow?
So the process is basically hopping into Discord, saying you want to be a fellow, and then we kind of take it from there. It's the existing fellows that will either induct you or say, maybe we're not ready for you right now. So that's generally how it works. Rachel, if there's anything else you want to say about that, feel free, but no pressure.
If you're absolutely new to the community, which you're not, Paul, we all know you now, but if you're absolutely new, we encourage you to come to meetings so we can get to know you and form a relationship, and then kind of see if it's a good fit.
I would
Cool.
vouch for Paul.
Thanks, Joby. Nice.
You
Okay,
got
yeah.
it.
I would love to become a fellow.
Awesome. That's what we like to hear.
Well,
Hey, Naran, I was just going to hop in for a half second and mention that there's a question in the comments or in the chat window right now. I just wanted to make sure that you saw it.
Thank you very much. I will take them now. So David's asking, is there a framework for businesses coming into the picture, getting involved, or do communities build these partnerships from the ground up? So that's a great question. So when it comes to these sponsored stamps, like at some point, we're going to have to get businesses to actually mint these. So what's the best way to say it? Like, it's basically building these from the ground up, building the partnerships from the ground up. So if there's already businesses that you think would be a good fit for this, we're going to want to talk to them. Right now, it's a little bit early because literally these stamps don't exist. But there's going to be a time where we're going to want a list of potentially interested businesses to start testing this out with. And again, I expect it to be more effective than what they're currently using, especially if their target audience is similar to the target audience that we already have in Panvala, that is crypto people. So if you're Coinbase spending a lot on marketing, a lot of the people in our communities are customers of exchanges. So I think that would be a good way to test it. But there's other businesses out there too. And again, Panvala is for everybody. So eventually this is going to make sense for every business.
Niran, I have a question. Is there any location limitation? I haven't heard other countries mentioned.
Really quick for Raphael, I just dropped my Calendly link in the chat where you can book some time. Tessie, for location restrictions, there are currently no location restrictions. So Panvala already has communities in North America, Europe, Africa, Asia. I don't think we have anybody in South America, but like we already include people all over the world, and we want to include more. It is always easier for me to work with North American communities because that's where I'm at, and secondly, probably European communities because slightly more homogenous than the rest of the world. but we want to include everybody. So there's no restrictions. The more the merrier.
I would say aside the sanctions, probably, is it?
Oh yeah. Aside the sanctions, I'm
Let's
not.
keep mentioning these things because we have to
Yeah.
really point out that, as inclusive as we are, there are limitations. Unfortunately, I must say, but yeah, we should probably mention that so that we can work on that.
That's definitely true.
But thanks, yeah.
That hasn't come up for us yet, but if someone living in Iran or in North Korea was trying to work with Panvala, we would have to say no right now.
I know, it's terrible. Yeah, thanks.
No problem. Any other questions?
Just out of curiosity, and I know this is a very big question, but from a governance perspective, and I'll do my own research, right? But I of course, the community governance aspect, naturally, in terms of like how you folks are working on building out, I'm just curious, like, what's your stance and how are you making decisions now at this point? Like, are you currently a DAO? And maybe I can find this out by looking at your website. So just tell me that. But
awesome. So we are a DAO, but we are a non-traditional DAO. That is, we have a custom on-chain governance system. So first, I'm going to talk about the on-chain system and then about the off-chain system that our on-chain system enables, because we rarely have to go through the on-chain process because we designed it to prioritize off-chain governance. So in most DAOs, it's proposal-based. You put up a proposal, you vote on it, and that's how you get everything done. Panvala is not like that. In Panvala, generally what we do is we put a budget proposal for the whole quarter on-chain, and if there are no disputes, if nobody challenges it, it just happens. That is, when you make that proposal for the budget, you got to stake some tokens. And if you put a proposal that was actually like not the consensus of the community, then anybody else can stake tokens, challenge it, and then that triggers a token vote, and then majority wins. But again, token voting is not our ideal governance system. That's just literally the backstop. That's how we do dispute resolution, is with token votes on chain. But we want to never use that. So the off-chain system, where we govern socially, is that community-based governance. That's where every community that's part of the network has a vote, and their vote is roughly weighted by their participation in Panvala. So literally, whatever tokens a community got the last quarter, it's kind of their voting weight if we needed to do a vote of communities. And generally, if there was a dispute among the communities, we would try to have some sort of super majority to like approve whatever's happening. Like, we're not trying to drag people along. We're trying to get as close to consensus as possible without requiring consensus for literally every single thing. But consensus is actually how we've operated so far. Like, we've never had to trigger either a vote of the communities off chain, and we've also never had to trigger a vote of token holders on chain. What we do is when we want to do something, like let's say we want to add a community to the Panvala League, what we do is we say, hey, this community wants to join. Here's some information about them. If there are no objections by so-and-so date, they will be admitted. So that's generally how we do most things. We propose, we say, hey, we're looking for objections. That's what we're doing. We want to incorporate those objections to try to make whatever proposal happy with everybody. And then if we can't make everybody happy, that's when we would start with trying to do a vote of the communities and then go with whatever that does. And if somebody still wants to dispute it on chain after that, they can do that. But we try to avoid as many disputes as possible.
thank you. Really great.
No problem.
Neron, did you see Kyle's comments in the chat?
Kyle's comments in the chat about joining the Telegram channel.
No, he shared an idea.
An idea.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh,
I
this
don't
would
know.
mean okay.
Yeah, I like that idea. Was there already a plan for how Panvala handles the money that's sitting in its treasury from sponsors before it goes to the collective action communities?
So currently it's just locked up. Like, literally we can't access it. Like, once the value goes back into the token supply, it's kind of like Bitcoin style rules where there's a half-life of 4 years. and that's when it'll be released again. So currently, the token supply that hasn't been distributed is literally not available for us to do anything with. That doesn't have to be what we do forever. That's the model that I came up with when we launched it. If we want to do something else, that's probably possible, but that's just not what we do right now. Really, you can think of the token as kind of secondary to our collective action. That is, in a lot of communities, like the primary concerns are, what's the value of the token? Like how liquid is the token? Everything about the token. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that in Panvala, that's just never been the focus. It's just about how many communities can we bring together? How can we help them work together? And how can we engage in collective action that drives more value to them is really the North Star. The token is just what we use to kickstart the system. That is, I think the network will grow faster because we use the token to do it, but it's not core to literally anything. Like the blockchain, you can literally build Panvala without blockchain technology if you wanted to, but the blockchain technology helps us grow faster.
Yeah, so what I was kind of thinking was there's probably going to be some math that I would like to do just to see what the difference would be. You know, having the advertisers onboarded and buying 100% PAN, and then contributing that back to the to the pool, where that PAN is then given back out to the communities, versus having them buy essentially 50% PAN and then provide the rest of that value as liquidity to the market, and then pay those liquidity tokens to Panvala, so that, you know, that could bootstrap protocol owned liquidity. And then also all the communities that are already receiving PAN would have more liquidity available for them to sell into. And then also in the future, as more advertisers come on board, there's less slippage and less price impact from them getting in. So I feel like that could potentially make it more resilient. But I don't know. Again, there's some math that kind of has to be done there to see what the difference would be, you know, and how much value the communities are receiving and how much resilience is kind of being added to the system.
Yeah, we're totally open to solutions like that. Like again, like so far, maximizing liquidity hasn't been like a primary issue for us. So we just haven't spent that much time thinking about that. But if it's a concern that like is present in our network of communities, then we're gonna have to come up with ways to solve it. And what you just described, I do think it's a potential way forward.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting, and I think you guys have definitely taken the smart route, which is to focus on, you know, building the community membership and aligning the communities. And now that you've, well, I should say we, because I'm going to join. You know, now we've hit sort of this critical mass of participation and influence, and so now we can use the underpinning sort of blockchain stuff to enable communities to actually capture the value that that they are creating.
That's the whole story. And really, a hint for the sequel is basically advertising is just one very easy to understand kind of value that we create that doesn't go to us. There are more. So like there's like the potential for like reshaping how value flows in our economy is actually quite large, larger in my opinion than the labor movement, which was a very big deal. They shifted a lot of value. I think we're going to shift more value than that, and it's going to go to all of our communities, and it's going to make a lot of people happier. All right, we are past the hour, so I want to let people go. I'm going to hang out here if anybody has any questions. And again, feel free. I shared my Calendly link in the chat. If there's other things you want to chat about, let's make that happen. Thanks for coming, everybody. Really excited to see how our collective action is going to put pressure on the existing economy to shift more value to each and every one of our communities and the communities of many people who aren't here today. Thanks, everybody.
This was awesome. Thanks, Neuron.
Thank you. So stoked. And nice to meet new people.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thank you. I'll speak with you shortly.
Sounds good.